Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at this pretty long part number that you'll be able to see in photographs down below. The camera's not going to focus on that too well. It's an RSRD2060R. This is basically a spring hinge from Stanley, is what it is. With the exception that it is a reverse spring hinge. And all that means is it doesn't close the door, it opens the door. Unless you might be installing this just in a surface mount sort of application where you're taking the hinge and you're literally laying it on top of the jamb and the door. I have a client who builds gates and he does that. You would want a reverse spring in that sort of sense so that it closes the door. Anyway, we'll talk more about that in a moment. First, the dimensional properties. This is a 3.5 by 3.5. That means it's 3.5 inch tall and 3.5 inch wide. That's what that means. The height is the first dimension. It's important to know that that's how hinges are sized. It might be extremely crucial to know that that's how hinges are sized, and it may not be. But no, it's the first dimension. So if someone tells me it's a 4.5 inch hinge, it's tall, 4.5 inch. I don't know the width yet because you've not said. It's the second dimension is the width when you talk about hinges. That's important to know. So that's a 3.5, 3.5. This is also a residential weight hinge, and that is about 96 thousandths. My caliper tells me this hinge is 0.095, so there you go. Now, why are you looking at this hinge? Why might you need this hinge to the point where you're looking at a video of me talking about it? Let's talk about that now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Well, it's most likely that you have an application where you wish to keep a door open, is the bottom line. Different odd applications of where you might use that, and it's generally a requirement that an individual has over the door. My gate fabricator earlier constantly ordered spring hinges. Didn't order them reverse, just always ordered spring hinges. And he'd ordered them for a couple of years. And he would order 8, 16 at a time, 20 at a time, whatever it would be. And then at a certain point he said, you know, every order that I place, one or two of the hinges are no good. And I said, first of all, you should have brought that to my attention immediately. So we can get it fixed. Second, that doesn't sound right. Spring hinges don't just stop working. We talked more about it. We talked at length about it. This was a couple of years ago for sure. And the client described his application, and then I said, please email me photographs. Well, he had put that right flat, and I sent him to the factory and said, just confirm what I already know. They're basically wanting to wind that hinge in the opposite direction and have it closed. And what the client was doing was turning the tension in the opposite direction on a normal spring hinge. And what would happen is the hinge, one or two of every order would fail because standard self-closing spring hinges are not meant to be wound backwards. And he was winding them backwards. And it was really a testament to the hinge manufacturer that 80% of them always worked when they were being used incorrectly. So you could be doing a full surface mount for some reason, even though this would not be the right application for that. We can do true full surface spring hinges, single acting spring hinges. Reach out to us for those, we can help. But most likely you simply want an application where the door is open rather than left closed, or the door comes to the point where the latch touches the strike and then the door resides there. You might want the door to be open because you may have a need for a pet to be able to come back and forth. And you don't want the door to be unintentionally closed. There might be somebody in the household, and it's generally residential that you'll see these hinges, that is closing the door. Either they know not to, or they have been told not to, and they're still doing it because they don't know that they're not supposed to do it. Or it could be an application where let's say there's a commercial condo building, there's 50 units, there's a common hallway where several units have access to a common bathroom. It's nice to look 50 feet down the hall before you walk the 100 feet, the 50 feet, then the 50 feet to find out that the room is occupied. So if that spring hinge is put on that door, it can be held open just to signify, yeah, it's unoccupied, it's vacant, it's available for you to use. So generally, reverse spring hinges are oddities. They're used to correct some sort of behavior that is a perturbance, is a botheration, is generally where I see it. Because you won't use a reverse spring hinge in any application other really than some odd application, meaning you're not going to put it on a normal door when you want the door to go into the closed position, and you will most definitely never use it on a fire-rated door. And that's probably where you're going to use this. Stanley makes a full complement of their standard, 2060R self-closing spring hinges, but then they can do the reverse of those as well. And this hinge, I've just kind of cracked that over a couple of times, and all it's doing is the spring is setting itself. So if I were to, because I've opened up that invitation to look at it is the bottom line. Okay, I've got that tension set. Ow, be careful. To where that will just snap fire closed. So you've got a door that is, well, that's too much spring tension. Let's get rid of some of the spring tension. Okay, you've got a door in the closed position. If I let those leaves go, it'll open up, is the bottom line. You set some more tension on there, then you're going to have more tension opening it up. Okay, that's what the hinge would look like when the door's in the closed position. When you unlatch the door, it will then come to the springed open position for you. And that's what this is. So very typical, very common. It is very normal for a client to call us and give us the part number that's on the back, and we'll look at these photographs in a moment as well so you can see that. This also has all of the UL and ULC stampings on it. That's normal for the manufacturer to put that on their spring hinges, but just simply know that a reverse spring hinge is not permissible on a fire door, nor is a 3.5. NFPA 80 says, I'm quite sure, and I've read it and forgotten it several times over, that 4 inches is the minimum size on a spring hinge. If you happen to be doing a fire door, this is the wrong hinge, but if you happen to be doing one, you must have a hinge that is 2 things. It's listed, which means it's been tested at the factory, and there's a file at the testing laboratory, like Underwriter's Laboratory, and that it's labeled. Spring hinges must be labeled, and that stamp is the label. Okay, that's your label right there. An inspector could take that off and look at that and say, yep, we are all good. That hinge is permissible for use on a fire door. That's what you're looking for in that regard. Okay, since we are playing with the setting of the spring tension, let's just dive into this. There will be installation instructions and a usage guide that we'll look at when we get to the screen view. Let's tour the rest of the parts. They use this perforated cardboard as a way to insulate the hinges from each other when they ship from the factory. Okay, this perforated cardboard is also cardboard shims. So if you have a non-fire rated application and you need some cardboard to stick back there to tip the door or cant the door in some direction or spread the gap over, they include these. They also sell these by the box, I think, of 100. So if you get these, maybe don't throw them away if you do a lot of door work. You're also, of course, going to get screws. This is packaged with all machine screws and all wood screws. I would encourage you to define in the comment field when you are placing your order what the composition is of the door and frame. You don't want to leave it to the factory to guess incorrectly, is the bottom line. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at this part number to make sure that we have the correct hinge. Yes, we do. Okay. Now, I would imagine, and it's really not published, but their standard fastener package is all machine screws and all wood screws. But I would define it, what you need. Best practice or proper detailing of hardware would include that information. What's my frame made of? What's my door made of? So that you get the right screws. There'll be also one single screw all on its own in its own packaging. That's meant to go up here. At this end of the hinge, and this could be the top or the bottom of the hinge, which is different than here. That's blank. After you are done adjusting the tension or removing the tension, you will then take that screw and thread it in, and it's like a dust cover. It covers that off really nice. Nice clean look is what the bottom line is. Now, setting of this tension is, when you get this installed, you can just ratchet that over, and that's what I just did, just set tension on it. You take the Allen wrench, which is always included, you insert it in, and what you need to do is push it down and give it a little bit of reverse action. As you're pushing it down, reverse action, then you can release it. So what I just did was I inserted it. I'm going to push it down and go clockwise with it, from my perspective, before I can go counterclockwise to release it. So I'm pushing it down, I'm going clockwise a little bit before I can go counterclockwise. Same scenario. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And there you go. So I've just turned that tension from plus a couple of clicks to minus a couple of ratchet stops. So in my opinion, I would probably get the hinge kind of, put in this sort of instance where you are about 60 degrees or 75 degrees, because from here you can attach the hinge to the door and frame. Your tool will get to there. Then I would just push the door closed, and then you're going to have a situation where the door's basically almost closed. Well, no, it'll be at about 45 degrees. And then you can test your tension. Well, obviously this isn't going to work because the hinge leaf doesn't go back to the closed position. So you're going to need to increase some of your tension. Okay, and that's just clockwise. You push that same tool in, down, and then just in, down, and then clockwise, and you'll continue to increase. I actually have it in the opened position. You're going to continue to increase that tension until you get it to exactly where you want. So I've got that door closed. Ratchet it up, and then you can adjust your tension accordingly. Okay, so that's going to keep that door open basically to 180 degrees. That's probably going to be too much. Let's go pick up our sprung wrench. Of course, one advantage of glasses is you do garner some eye protection, and I do suggest whenever you're doing a project, put something on. You never know when something can end up in your eye. It's happened to me countless times. So that's the adjustment procedure. It's in the installation instructions, which I'm going to show you, but I wanted to demonstrate it live. There's a usage guide here that tells you how many hinges you need based on the door according to the manufacturer's guidelines. At this point now, let's switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look at all of the supporting information. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, here we are looking at the item in the website. Let's take a look at some photographs that we have of this material itself. There's the box, there's the part number. And I didn't mention it earlier, this is a 1/4-inch radius corner. That's part of the RD as well. The RDRS, radius corner reverse spring hinge. RS. 1/4-inch radius, where does that come from? Well, when you're routing the door in the frame and you have a 1/2-inch router bit in your tool, that's going to leave a 1/4-inch radius. If you don't go back and square those corners like most pre-hangers wouldn't, only because it takes longer extra time, you're left with a 1/4-inch radius. 5/8 radius is the similar thing. That's when you're using an 1.5-inch diameter router bit. The difference between 1.5 inch, pardon me, I said 1.5, I meant 1.25. 1.25 and 1/2 inch is that you're removing a lot more material with every tool pass when you use 1.25 diameter router bits. 1/2 is 5/8. That would be the radius. That's what's in the box, or that's what you'll probably see when you buy one. There's the hinge. UL means it's labeled. It's a stamped. It's a listed hinge. Manufacturer, capital letter F. If you look at hardware that's 30 years old or older, you'll see a lowercase f. Lowercase f means the hardware has been tested to neutral pressure, And capital letter F means it's been tested to positive pressure, the modern way of testing forces that occur during a fire at a door. There's the hinge looking down from what would most likely be the bottom of it. Actually, just showing the full mortise nature of it, this is what we would call the swag. The bend on the hinge leaf is the swag. That's what makes this a full mortise hinge. RD2060R, special Z. Here's your label, ULC, UL listed, UL Canada, UL just the United States. Installation instructions, etc. that we've already gone over. Screws, your dust screw, your Allen wrench, your wood shim, your cardboard shims. All right. Now, extended description information. Let's take a closer look at that. Full mortise, reverse acting spring hinge, 1/4 inch radius, 3.5 by 3.5. 0.099 is what they say. That's good enough for the thickness. Made of steel. This is polished chrome plated, it says. This is wrong. This will be updated by the time you're seeing this video. It's polished brass, which would be US 3 or 632 would be the codes that you would use. Approved for doors up to 2870. This is not approved for any fire-rated doors. Used for labeled fire doors, stairwell doors, motel doors. Yeah, we're going to have that. I'll have that removed. We'll have that changed to not permitted. Automatically closes door. Obviously, we're just copying information from standard self-closing hinges, but we'll get that cleaned up. Patented ratchet adjustment eliminates the need for adjustment locking pin. There are some hinge manufacturers who incorporate a tension pin. This does not have that sort of feature. I happen to like the Stanley model a lot because there is no tension pin at all. Another piece of equipment that can just get lost. This is classified as a grade 1 hinge, which means it's been tested to 1 million cycles. And then again, not permissible for use on fire doors. Sold as each. When you buy one, we'll ship you one. Many links down here. We're going to take a look at those, but first, there's the anatomy of this hinge. You can review that if you like, except to say that you've got a 2060R, which is a square corner, RD2060R, 1/4 inch radius, RD2068R is your 5/8 radius. Now, let's go through these links one at a time. Product catalog. This will allow you to review all things Stanley spring hinge related. I would suggest that you review this should you have further interest to dive deeper into the manufacturer's catalog. I won't bother with that here. This video is long enough to begin with. Template. This will be a dimensional drawing showing everything important dimensionally about the hinge. That might be something you want to look at before ordering the hinge to make sure that the holes for the screws line up exactly where you need them to. It's most likely that they will. This half moon pattern, some people call it, is called the template pattern. It would be unusual for you to have a modern hinge that is not the template pattern on a 3.5 inch tall hinge. Okay. Then let's take a look at the instructions. These are in the box, as I said. Pretty simple. To increase torque, close the door. Rotate that torque wrench or Allen wrench clockwise to increase torque. Do not exceed 6 ratchet clicks, is what they say. I would certainly not attempt to get to 6 ratchet clicks if I'm going past 90 degrees. If you're going past 90 degrees, I'd probably keep that to 4 settings of tension. This is how you decrease the torque. Put that wrench in and push it down, and then rotate it counterclockwise to the new setting. It'll be pretty obvious after you start tooling with it. And then you put that safety screw, they call it. That cleans that off. Makes a nice clean installation. There is then the usage and selection guide. This is the other side of the installation instructions and basically tells you you've got 70-pound doors up to this size. Consider using one spring hinge with 2 ball bearing hinges basically, or some sort of anti-friction hinge. 115 pounds, 160 pounds, etc. Okay. I rarely see somebody successfully use one spring hinge. I would think 2 would be a minimum for basically every application. And I say that because, well, if it's a hollow core door and you're doing a reverse action, 1 hinge ought to do it. Because all you're trying to do is get the door moved open. Whereas in a closing application, you have to overcome the resistance of the latch bolt hitting the lip of the strike plate when almost all of your stored energy in the spring has been expended or released. So if you're doing a standard self-closing hinge, I'd probably consider 2 immediately. Install your spring hinges at the top hinge location as a last location. Bottom and middle, middle and bottom first. The top hinge should always be the anti-friction ball bearing, concealed bearing, or anti-friction construction, because it's the top hinge that holds 70% of the door weight, and a spring hinge is not a load bearing or weight rated product. You won't want the spring hinge to do that job unless you're using spring hinges in all applications, which in that case you have no choice. So this guide is very handy for you to review. Let's take a look. Then we also have maintenance instructions. That's probably going to be a pretty straightforward document. Keep it clean is the bottom line. Buildup of dust and debris is going to facilitate the degradation and failure of the hinge, wear and tear, that kind of thing. Now there's a link below this video as seen here to the manufacturer's page, and when we click on that we can pull up not only all of the Stanley hinges that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to that full spring hinge catalog. Other resources are here as well. I'll show you the hinge catalog that I like the most from Stanley, and if you'll find the word manufacturers wherever it occurs in the site, because by the time you're seeing this, the design may be changed. Get to the manufacturer's page, then do a find function on your keyboard for Stanley. Go to Stanley Hardware. The catalog that I like is this 2010 Architectural Hardware Catalog. It's a classic Stanley catalog that's laid out that will show you all things hinge, or at least at that time, related to Stanley, including their 2060 series spring hinges are definitely in here. Okay, so if you want the full line Stanley catalog, now you know where to find it. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Now there's no doubt that Stanley is certainly in my top 2 of hinge manufacturers. That's just how I feel about it. What I like about Stanley, their advantage is they have exceptional fit and finish. When the hinge comes to you, it looks like it's been manufactured by a company who has total command over the manufacturing process. It's not scratched, it's not dusty, it's not dirty. They do a really nice job when it comes to finishing, especially in here in the crotch of the hinge. Not every manufacturer is really good at getting that area finished as well. Also, because Stanley is a very comprehensive manufacturer of hinges, I have had requirements of hinges. There are two hinge companies that will entertain every request. Stanley is one of them, and I find that Stanley will deliver on very odd requests more than all other manufacturers. I had a need for, a client had ordered from an alternate manufacturer many years ago. He actually ordered, he had plain bearing, heavyweight, wide throw hinges. Very strange. Why? Well, wide throw hinges are not load bearing. Plain bearing is not load bearing, really. Heavyweight tells me, why are you ordering a thicker hinge leaf? Well, you got a heavier door or more volume. But that wide throw and that plain bearing just are counterintuitive to that. I tried to get the original manufacturer, who clearly made this hinge maybe 5 decades ago, to make me a concealed bearing. So you can do an anti-friction hinge where you don't see the bearing packets, and they refused to do it. Okay. I needed an acorn tip on this wide throw hinge, 4.5 by 7. Heavyweight. Wouldn't do it. And the acorn tip would have matched perfectly because it was that original manufacturer's hinge. Contacted Stanley. They have their CT tip. They don't call it an acorn tip, but it looks pretty similar. Yeah, they could do a concealed bearing. Their CB199 is what it was. The point is that the barrel assembly, actually from over here when the door's closed, looks like a plain bearing hinge because you don't see any of the anti-friction apparatus. Visually, it worked great. The client could move to that acorn tip from Stanley that's not an acorn tip but very close, and it worked. It just worked great. Not in the Stanley catalog at all. You know, they don't list that, but they were able to make it in a polished brass and solid brass base material is the bottom line. The one downside of Stanley is they do most definitely have lead times, so keep that in mind when you're considering ordering from Stanley. Their garden variety material, the FBB 191, the FB 179, these things are always going to be in stock. But you want something unusual, it's going to be 6 weeks generally, and it's because they're manufacturing overseas. Take that for what it's worth, but I'm mentioning it to you because that's the fact of the matter. I like the Stanley logo in the sense that you wouldn't see that UL unless it was a spring hinge, but I like that Stanley logo because it's petite. It's not huge corporate advertising on my hardware. I've done jobs for, there's a particular woodworker that has a client, and they do a lot of business. They don't want to see the name of the manufacturer on the face of the mortise cylinder housing. They just don't want to see it. It takes away from their aesthetic. And I get that. And, you know, if you're going to put corporate advertising on the hardware, keep it tasteful. Stanley does that with that tiny little logo. Any questions on the RDRS, I think I got that right, 2060R reverse action spring hinge? And obviously you can do these in 4x4 and 4.5, 4.5 as well. Any questions on this or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.